Hello, Terracon4. Been a while since I last made one of these videos. So today, somebody asked me about if I could make a video about how to apply the rotations from my turret controllers onto a skeletal mesh. Now, in the documentation for my turret controller, at least, I do have a bit of an example going over this, but this is a video to make it a bit more clear, hopefully. So to start off with, I've got a copy of just the default turret demo blueprint. And we're going to take this guy and we're going to modify him over here. It is worth saying, I've got him set up here, set him to auto-possess, so that I'll be able to easily work with him. Pretty straightforward. This will apply basically one for one over on my AI turret controller as well. So, in its blueprint right now, it's just the basic thing. The key part to understand is this works by having a turret mesh, a barrel mesh, and each of these just rotate. That's normally what it does. But if you've got a skeletal mesh, you want a skeletal mesh's bones to rotate. Now, there are a few ways, generally speaking, the best way though is to probably use an animation blueprint. So, this time, that's what we're going to be doing here. Here's an example of the mesh I'm pulling out. My heavy artillery walker from my game Haunted Witch, or Witch Hunt, as it previously was known. In this case, we have a turret, a barrel, and a second barrel, which is more about recoil. So, we're going to start off by taking this and adding a skeletal mesh into this turret and setting this as the heavy artillery walker. Boom. Now, the heavy artillery walker, we're going to set this as the base. So this is now our base mesh, is this giant walker. And we've got our mesh here, the old base. We've moved this up around here. Now I'm going to take this and go to the parent socket and attach this to the heavy artillery walker base. And with this, that roughly is mimicking the idea of where that piece is. Now, right now, we're going to go in here and we play with this. We're going to pretty much have what you'd expect. Our little turret up here can rotate and look around, but that's not really what we want. We want the giant turret underneath it to move. So, in order to make it so this actually starts to convert, we need to start off by effectively taking the rotations of these and telling that the rotation of this. So to start off with, you'll take your mesh, wherever it may be, in this case that'd be the mesh here, right-click, create a animation blueprint. In this case, I already have one. Where's that at? There. So the animation blueprint is then something which we can use to actually set up animations. Over in the event graph, I start off by going down here and under variables, click create, set to a float, and then make variables for a piece of information that you need. In this case, I made one for turret rotation. Then I made one for barrel rotation, and then I also made one for barrel recoil. Then we go to the anim graph panel, and by default, this would all be blank. So to start with, you'd want to take like your existing animations or anything you have, or just idle animations or idle pose, and use that as your starting point. In this case, I just took the walking as the starting point, and then you've got your output pose. And between everything you already have going on and the output pose is where we're going to want to modify stuff for our turret's rotation. Now, for most poses, these are using a local type of rotation rule, so go local to component, and with this you can just create a node which will convert local into component. Now we don't exactly want all of this, so once you do this, after that you can drag off of this and do a modify bone. Modify bone lets you go over to here, the various bones you have. In this case, there's our turret bone and our barrel bones. And then you'd set a bone, and then after you've set, say, barrel 1, so this would be the thing to rotate that barrel up and down, you would go down to, say in this case we want a rotation. Default rotation mode is ignore. That means any inputs here don't do anything. We would want to set this to depends on exactly what you're doing, replace or add existing. In this case I could just use place, but add existing will be worked for this one, and for a lot of animations you're probably going to want to use the add existing. So you could take this and set to add existing. And now, anything that you apply to these, such as here if we hit this, it'll start doing its thing. But if I set this and plug that into 60 and recompile, wait, did I get that on the right one? Tag, rotation, add existing, barrel 1. Right, add existing, down here, I think I set this one up to replace existing. So yeah, this one's overriding it right now. Either way. General gist is you create one of these and you set to add or replace existing. The preview one I'd set up with replacing existing. If you've got a bunch of complex animations already going on and you want to carefully tweak them, add existing might, but that also might result in idle animations causing them to waver inaccurately, so replace existing will sometimes be better. It really varies on what exactly you're doing. It doesn't really make too much difference if you're starting from a idle, relatively stationary starting point, though. So, either way, basic rule that we set up is we set one of these to be for our turret bone. So, horizontal rotation of the turret. We make one for the barrel, the vertical rotation on the barrel. And then I also made one for the idea of the recoil for the barrel, which is, in this case, instead of modifying the rotation, it modifies the, where's that translation? Just adds to existing to slide it back. Then I took each of these variables, dragged them in, took off of these, used a make rotator or a make vector, so I can just easily plug in. And basically you want to start off with, like, here for the turret, compile, start like this way, go this, hit 50, recompile. Yep, that's the right one. But say we went and hit 50 here, we'd get that's not exactly what we're looking for. You can go over here and, check out what the axis of your bones are. In this case, most of our Y's are pointing down, and our X's are pointing to the side. So you can go here and check stuff in order to figure it out, or you can just play around over here. So in this case, Y is the one that we want to do. And with that, if I take this turret rotation and set it to, say, 45, the turret would rotate 45. 90 would rotate 90. 180, it's looking backwards. You get the idea. So now we have one float which can control the rotation of this thing's bones. Barrel rotation. Let's just pause this sucker. Where's the pause thing? Just don't do anything. That'll keep it from annoyingly walking around. I probably should have just set that to the idle reference pose, but whatever. Otherwise, so barrel rotation. 40 puts it up, puts it down. So in this case, we plugged into the X, but also this one had X going the wrong way. So a positive value of 40 rotated it down. So I just dragged off of this, created a multiply node, -1. So you might need to do minor tweaks like this to correct for the desired axis. But with this, yeah, 20 points it up, 0 points it straight forward. Using the modify, or again, the barrel bone on the skeletal mesh, which in this case would be this one. As you can see, it rotates down the X. Negative value to go up. So then, and finally, there's this whole recoil thing. This is just moving along the translation along the Y-axis. In this case, since it's recoiling, I figured we could do a lerp style of like a 0 to 1. And so I found the distance I wanted. It moves back 500 in order to recoil fully. So 0 to 1 recoil amount. Alright, so with this is the basic addition that you might have. Like, this is a little bit extra. You also might have things like rotation for Gatling gun turrets or whatever other mechanics you got going on, but at the core it's these two. One thing for your turret, one thing for your barrel, and then have a float, the variable that you just put in the rotation values for. Now we can go back here, we can take this mesh, we can go here to animation blueprint, and we set that animation blueprint. So now it'll be using that other one. Now, we're going to want to take our skeletal mesh, instance. Take that and save this as the animation instance for our turret. Start that begin play. I have to clean up that old thing. So with this, we take a reference source skeletal mesh. We get the animation instance, which is in this case, because here it was set to use animation blueprint, that will effectively be referencing the instance of animation blueprint that this thing is going to be running while playing. And now we've got this a nice, easy, referenceable form, which you can reference wherever. Now, by default, we got a little tick down here. We're just going to take that, downloading it right now. So, what we want is to take our turret rotation and our barrel rotation. So the turret is this, and the barrel is this. Now, it's worth saying, these can just be in, like, you could literally just have them be a cube. A default cube, they don't even technically have a mesh there, and then you can just set hidden in-game, invisible, and these can be invisible things that nobody sees. But you still need to have objects for the turret controller, AI, or player to actually control. So we get the reference to these, and we just get relative rotation. Get relative rotation. Simple as that. Now, in this case, we're going to cast to ha movement animation blueprint from this instance. In many cases, you might want to create a standardized blueprint interface message that you can send to stuff, but in this case, it's one actor to one animation blueprint for a quick demo. This is faster, so I'll just use this. Set turret rotation. Actually, you know, we're going to take this and set this to the, basically had we dragged off of here and created it as a thing here, we would have, like, right-click promote to variable, it would have turned it into this type, but with this, we only have to cast to once at the very beginning. It's been a little while since I fiddled with this myself, so that's the way. So with this, we don't have to cast on the tick. It'll be slightly more efficient to simply get our animation instance and reference that only. By the way, so turret rotation, this was the thing which over here controls that turret's rotation. So we go here, get here our relative rotation. I'm just going to use split. You can also take this into a break. Basically the same thing. So for the turret mesh here, it'll be the z-axis. And then I'll set barrel rotation. And for here, that's going to be the y, or pitch rotation, coming from our barrel. So with this, each tick, we're going to take the rotations of these and send them to the animation instance here. Which now means we rotate here, and our giant cannon barrels are more or less matching our stuff. That said, it's not quite ideal yet, since this thing, importantly, doesn't match up perfectly. So how do we make this work a little bit better? Well, on the point where our turret is there, and it's worth saying, this big sucker's axis for that turret rotating is right on there. So that's fine. We can leave this right on that core point. But then when it comes to our barrel, we want to take this and adjust this thing's rotation so it more closely matches to the actual rotational axis. of this giant cannon. Now it's worth saying you might want to select your giant cannon and create like a arrow or something, and make sure this is child to that skeletal mesh, and go and use the socket or barrel one. And with this, you have an arrow that you can visibly see. Okay, it's right here, and you can say, all right, take this and bring that slightly more down there. And all right, just over a little bit, good enough. So with this barrel will now be roughly rotating in line with that one. And then we take the emitter, and for the sake of shooting stuff, we bring this all the way over here to the front and align it a little bit better. Because otherwise, if we have those turrets up here, when this top turret pointed up, or is firing directly ahead, it would always be aiming, slightly inaccurately, because this one has a slightly different perspective from the giant mesh down here. So if something spawns from this, it would always be aiming just below where you're aiming. So by making sure these are properly aligned relative to each other's bones, we can have this work right. Now, key part, the turret there is still the parent of that barrel, but we need to still have it so they're offset so that they match roughly where the bones are, because when this turret rotates, this is going to make the whole rotation on the skeletal mesh match it, which means this barrel, which is currently offset to match where this big skeletal mesh would be, it will be also rotating to match with the skeletal mesh. So now we take this, and this spring arm, let's go and bump that up to like, let's probably do like, let's just take that really far back. So with this, we now have a giant turret of a skeletal mesh that matches our static meshes. And then, yeah, you would want to take these and basically either make them just not even have mesh things to begin with, or set them to be hidden in-game, or use the visible option and untick that. In this case, there is, no visible meshes or other things getting in the way. You just get your giant turret. Now, not exactly the biggest fan of how that one is working, so let's take our spring arm and bring it up a bit more. So we can see a bit better as we look up, but pew 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 pew. Yeah. And that's more or less the gist of it. So again, basic steps are you just have a skeletal mesh in scene. You want to have the turret component childed to that skeletal mesh, going via the socket, parent socket. You want to have this thing properly attached to the base or whatever. Let's see. Right, we weren't using the turret where we have the base because when I've done this before, I usually make so the skeletal mesh was actually counted as the base component, but in this case, I just quickly dragged everything up, so we got base turret and all this stuff going on here. Otherwise, yeah, the base is attached to the mesh, which means this whole thing will be moving along with this mesh piece. Actually, no, that was, never mind. Ignore that last piece of advice. That did work for that one case I was last using that in, but that is a very regular case. In most cases, you will still need the actual base component. So you'll basically, just make your 3 static mesh components. They could literally just be invisible cubes or whatever. Doesn't matter. I child it to the bone or socket. Like if this is on top of a battleship, you'd use it on the main hull. If it's a gun on somebody's hat, you'd attach it, you'd socket it to their head, because that's what the turret is actually finally being linked to. So in this case, it needs to be attached to the body, which is the central part that shakes around while it's walking. Then your turret, you're just getting the rotation, z-axis from that. The barrel, get the rotation, y-axis, which here on a tick we were doing. Get the turret component, get relative rotation, barrel, relative rotation, and by having the skeletal mesh, which we dropped in, having an animation instance via the animation blueprint, and in this case we just used the cast to method. Any method you have in order to get access to the variables that you created in it works. I've learned to dislike casting in larger games, but for small games it's fine, and for some cases it's good like this. Much quicker for examples. And just set that. So with that, as long as you have variables then created here in your animation blueprint, the recoil then you could have set up so like whenever you fire, you might have an animation blueprint with a custom curve, a timeline, timeline that you add with a custom curve on it, and that float goes like 0 up to 1, and then gradually back down to 0. Something that you could custom tweak the recoil effects, and then you could have that be setting the recoil as well. Otherwise, you also might, if you have a firing animation, you could use set that up and use this as add. What was that? It's once again, it's been a while since I've messed with some of these parts in Unreal Engine. You can have that go and create the add a local animation. Geez, I'm forgetting the term for that. Where it creates you basically overlay one piece of animation onto specific bones or parts of the mesh. So you could have it so that it still shows a much more complicated firing system going on there. But at its core, you're just setting up your rotation nodes to modify the rotation, and possibly, if needed, some other stuff. And doing this. It's pretty simple, so hopefully this has helped. I feel like I've probably explained this more than I need to, but at the same time, if you don't actually know it, then I know that it can be really confusing, so even with this, it still may not be enough, or just the way I'm describing it might be good. It's been a while since I've done a tutorial video, so hopefully this is still a decent tutorial video. Hopefully for anyone who's been wanting to do this, this will help. So yeah. Till next time, have a pleasant day, everybody, and stay productive.